This may actually be the final video in our series here. And what I want to do, I just want to jump onto, we're going to look for the JNCIS practice test, JNCIS-ENT. And what I'm going to say is practice test. And this should be able to gauge our readiness for the actual exam. I'm actually hoping I get more than 90% in this. And what I've done to prepare for this, I haven't gone through every single one of my videos. I've just watched the animations. Now, the animations cover the theory reasonably well. Well, from my point of view, they do. And if I don't score then 90%, then, as I said, I'm going to be a bit annoyed. But then again, on the flip side of that, if I don't score them more than 90%, it means that there's a few holes in these courses that I'll probably need to plug. But I think the course is pretty well done. You should be able to pass this exam first time. So I'll probably pause the video here because I don't want to show my personal login details. And we'll come back when the test is about to begin. Okay, so we're back now and the exam is just about to start. So let's just get into it. Which three mechanisms are associated with the bridging process? So I remember doing this in the IRB video, and it should be flooding is one of them, filtering, and is it listening? I know that it's flooding and filtering. I think the last one is aging, yeah. Looks like a good start. Referring to the exhibit, all users connected to the same VLAN can communicate with each other, but not with users on other VLANs in the network. What must be configured to enable communication between the VLANs? Again, we're going back to the IRB video, and the answer is a single logical IRB interface must be created and assigned to all three VLANs. No, that's not correct. Wait up. A logical IRB interface must be created and assigned to each VLAN. Yeah, each VLAN needs its own IRB. All right. Next. Which statement is correct about trunk ports? Trunk ports must have an IRB assigned. No. By default, trunk ports accept only VLAN tagged traffic. Yes, that is correct. By default, a trunk port can have only a single VLAN. No. All right. How many untagged VLANs can be configured on an EX series switch port? 4096. Wait up. The question is saying how many untagged VLANs, and an untagged VLAN is one that goes up to the access port, isn't it? Yeah. Tagged VLANs are what cross the trunk. Untagged goes up to access port. So the answer is 1. Need to really read the question and understand what's going on. All right. Which two mechanisms populate the switching table and ensure that the switching table remains current? This is flooding and learning. Based on the output shown in the exhibit, which statement is correct? The GE009 interface is using the default priority value. I can't remember what the default priority value is. This switch has been elected as the root bridge. Yes, because all of its ports are forwarding and designated. So that's the answer. This switch has been elected as the root bridge. The switch has a bridge priority of 32. Well, we know that that's the answer. I'm pretty confident that the switch has been elected as the root bridge. Move on. Which two elements are used to create the spanning tree bridge ID? This is the MAC address and the port priority. These are the two. What are the three possible port states when using rapid spanning tree? This goes back to our spanning tree diagram, and it should be discarding, learning, and forwarding. They're the three, not tagging and listening. So the reason why it's discarding, because it took the normal spanning tree port state of disabled, blocking, and listening, They're the ones that they don't learn MAC addresses on, and merge them all into the discarding state. And the only two left of that are learning and forwarding. You manage the layer 2 network shown in the exhibit. You experience a failure on the GE000 link between switch 1 and switch 2. Which statement is correct about the expected behavior? Switch 2's GE002 port role and state will remain as designated and forwarding. Well, we need a root port to point to where the root bridge is. Switch 2 will remove itself from the RSTP topology. That's just nonsense. Switch 2 GE002 port role and state will transition to root and forwarding. Yes, I agree with this one. You are enabling dynamic ARP inspection on an EX4300 switch. Which service is enabled by default in this scenario? DHCP snooping. And again, I watched the videos. All I had to do was watch the animations. I didn't have to watch all 17 hours of the recording. Just watch the animation, which covers the theory. Which statement about configuring persistent MAC learning is correct? Persistent MAC learning can be configured on redundant trunk groups. I don't think that's it. Persistent MAC learning can be configured on access mode interfaces. That's the one I'm looking for. Which statement is, and another tip when you're doing exams, guys, that I find out, try to eliminate the ones that you definitely know it's not, and then you manage to reduce your probability of error. So which statement is true about layer 2 firewall filters on EX series switches? Now I know that the firewalls on the EXs are stateless. So anything that says stateful, I've already got out. The only two answers I need to know, is it evaluated by the control plane or is it evaluated by the forwarding plane? Now the control plane is where all of the intelligence is, but with firewall filters, I don't even think it goes up to the control plane like for routing protocols and stuff. So I would say they are stateless and evaluated by the forwarding plane. That's my answer. Which two port security features use the DHCP snooping database for additional port security? Dynamic ARP inspection and IP source guard. Referring to the output shown in the exhibit, which two statements are true? Which two statements are true? The root is an aggregate root. Well, I see it saying aggregate preference 130, but it's also got the generate flag. If you look near the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom, the generate flag is here. So it's definitely a generate root. And do we know if it's active? I would say it's active only because it's got a star next to it. So where we see aggregate preference 130 in the middle here, it's got a star next to it. So I would say the root is active and it's a generate root. Given the root shown in the exhibit, which two prefixes contribute to the aggregate root? So the aggregate is a .16. Now, if I can open up a notepad, not sure, I'll show you how I would work this out. So we've got 128, 64, and you've got a 16. So basically, anything on this side of 16 is not possible. Otherwise, it would go straight into the 32. Yeah? So we could have 16, 17, 18, 19, all the way up to 31. And if it went into 32, then it would go into the next sector. I don't know if I explained that very well, but I know what I'm talking about, I think. So if I go back up to here, it could only be 30 and 31 because 32 and 33 would go into the next bit stack. When layer 3 load balancing is configured on the Junos device using the load balance per packet parameter, which 3 parameters are used to distinguish traffic flows? Destination IP address, source port. I would have thought if it's using a port, it would go up to layer 4, then it's UDP and TCP. So I would say destination IP address, source IP address, and the protocol. The source port and the destination port would go up to layer 4. That's my reasoning. That's my rationale in that anyway. When configuring a static route, which parameter is used to reach a device that is not directly connected? The resolve parameter. Which OSPF packet type is sent when an OSPF router detects its database is stale? Link state request. Referring to the exhibit, what do the asterisks indicate? Show OSPF database. The router received the entries are stale. The router originated the entries are new. Good question. I would say that the router originated the entries. Okay, that's good. Referring to the exhibit, which router becomes the OSPF designated router when all routers are powered on at the same time? So we know that the first thing that it looks at is its priority value, and the higher priority wins. So in this case, R3 and R4 are already ruled out. So we're looking at R1 and R2, and I would say that the device with the higher router ID would become the DR. So I'm going to say R2. Which two OSPF header fields must match to form an adjacency over a broadcast connection? Well, I know the hello interval is 1. The other one, I might have to take a guess. I would say the neighbor, because router priority, I don't think so, and I don't know what the options field is. I have to be honest. Based on the trace options output shown in the exhibit, what is the problem with the adjacency? Well, we've got it right here in the middle where it says the OSPF packet ignored because of an area mismatch. So I'm going to say it's an area mismatch issue. What are two characteristics of OSPF ABRs? ABRs link two OSPF areas, definitely that one. ABRs transmit routing information between the backbone and other areas, yes. ABRs cannot be part of the backbone and another area at the same time. Definitely not that, because that's the whole purpose of an ABR. ABRs inject routing information from outside that OSPF domain. That's an ASBR. So I'm pretty confident with those answers. When electing a DIS in an ISIS network, what is used to break a priority tie? The highest MAC address. Yeah, definitely. You have configured the router with an ISIS interface metric of 2048. However, the ISIS interface metric of 63 is being applied for the interfaces of this router. What must you do to enable the larger metric value? Enable level 1 ISIS routing? No. It's something to do with wide metrics, so enable wide metrics. Yes, that's what I'm going to say. Disable narrow metric. Actually, I'm going to change it to disable narrow metrics because narrow and wide metrics are both enabled automatically on JNCIS. So you have to disable narrow metrics by using the wide metrics only command, which disables narrow metrics. So I'm going to say disabling narrow metrics. Referring to the exhibit, what will be the ISIS adjacency results of the configurations? So we have router 1 saying level 2 disable, and router 2 saying level 1 disable. So router 1 can only use level 1, and router 2 can only use level 2. So no ISIS adjacency will form. Which statement is the correct about the ISO net address shown in the exhibit? The authority and format identifier is 00. No, because the AFI here is 49. The area identifier is 0001. Yeah, that's correct. I don't even need to look at the others. I don't think. I will do though. This is not a valid net address. No, it looks valid to me. Okay, that's good. Referring to the exhibit, why is the root for 10.5.5.5 hidden? Well, I can't even see the root 10.5.5.5. Oh, here it is. 10.5.5.5. BGP preference, 17 root distinguisher. Next hop type is unusable. So the next hop cannot be resolved. Let's just look a bit further. Secondary hidden, local AS. It has a community. No, the next hop cannot be resolved. That's what I'm going for. Referring to the exhibit, which two statements are correct? Choose two. Router A sends routes learned from router D to router B and router C. No, because if that's IBGP, we know that the IBGP synchronization rule says that a route learnt from an IBGP peer, which router D is, cannot be sent on to another IBGP peer, which router B and router C are. So router A sends routes learned from router E to router B, router C and router D. Yes, I would say that is correct. Router A does not send routes learned from router E. No, router A does not send routes learned from router D to router B and router C. Yeah, that's correct. Okay. Both the R1 and R2 devices are advertised in prefix X into AS65530 with the BGP attribute shown in the exhibit. Which statement is correct in this scenario? R1's version of prefix X will be active because, so I thought that local preference is only to determine how routes exit your system. So I'm ruling out local preference. Now I could be totally wrong here. I'm not sure, but I'm just talking about my theory. So I'm going to say that R2's version of prefix X will be active because of the AS path attribute. Referring to the exhibit, which two statements about BGP prefixes advertised by R1 to AS65501 are true? R1 will modify the cluster list attribute. R1 will modify the next hop. Well, yeah, that one's definitely... is it though? Wait, let me take that off. R1 will modify the cluster list attribute. Referring to the exhibit, which two statements about BGP advertised by R1 going to the BGP peer. Okay, that's fine. So the next hop attribute will be done, and also I'm going to say the AS path. And that's only because they're both well-known mandatory attributes that I said that. Okay, which statement is true about the configuration shown in the exhibit? Alright, only the local preference import. So we know that if it's done right under BGP is less specific than if it's done under the group, which is less specific than if it's done under a particular neighbor. So only the local preference import policy will be evaluated when routes are learned from neighbor 172.30.1.1. So where is one? So for neighbor 172.30.1.1, it has import local preference and export advertise aggregate. So that's what I'm looking for. Only the local preference import policy will be evaluated when routes are learned. Import. Only the local preference import policy. Both the add community and local preference import, no, because this import local preference is more specific. Only the add community import will be evaluated. No import policy. So it's the first one then. Only the local preference import policy will be evaluated when routes are learned from neighbor 172.30.1.1. What are three well-known mandatory BGP attributes? We've got AS path, next hop, and I'm deciding between local preference and origin. But I did look at this. Which one? Local. Origin. It's going to be origin because that is passed all the way through, because the origin is like whether the root was learnt by an IGP or EGP or incomplete, and that's passed all the way through. Whereas local preference is only determining how you exit the local AS. An EBGP session sources its TCP connection from which IP address? The IP address of the interface that connects the two BGP speakers, that's what I'm going to say. It's not loopback because that's the local address, and that's only usually done with IBGP. Has to be modified for EBGP. The GR000.0 interface on your JNCIS device has a link state of up, and you have correctly added static routes to reach the remote subnets. However, you are not seeing traffic pass over the tunnel. What might be causing this issue? The endpoints do not have valid routes to the remote tunnel endpoints. No, that doesn't make sense to me. You have not configured keep lives on the endpoints. Doesn't need keep lives. The intermediary devices do not have valid routes to the remote tunnel endpoints. I didn't think they needed them. The tunnel interfaces are disabled. Well, it says up, so it can't be that they're disabled. So I'm going to go with this one then. The intermediary devices do not have valid routes to the remote tunnel endpoints. Interesting. Let me read that again. The intermediary devices do not have valid routes to the remote tunnel endpoints. Okay. So there's a routing issue there. You configure the GRE tunnel that traverses a path using default MTU settings. You want to ensure that packets are not dropped or fragmented. In this scenario, what is the maximum packet size that would traverse the GRE tunnel? Now we know that the normal MTU of like an Ethernet interface is 1500, and GRE uses 20 something, 24 or 26. So if you take that away from 1500, that should give you an answer. And the only one that suits there is 1476. Now so that must mean that the GRE overhead is 24, not 26. Okay. Which two statements describe NSR? NSR requires GRES to function properly. Yes. NSR provides routing loop protection. I don't think so. NSR provides high availability with multiple routing engines. Yes, that's it. Okay. You are adding a new EX4300 member switch to your existing EX4300 virtual chassis. However, the new member is not running the same JNCIS version as other members. By default, what is the expected behavior in this scenario? The new switch is not recognized by the virtual chassis. No. The new switch will be assigned a member ID and then placed in an inactive state. Maybe. The virtual chassis will transition into a split brain situation between the existing master routing engine and the switch running the different version. No. The new switch will automatically pull the correct version from the master routing engine and perform the necessary upgrade. Ooh, maybe. So I'm looking at either B or D. Now, I don't know the answer to this, but I've eliminated the other two, so it's one of these two. So I've got a 50-50 chance of getting this right. If I get it, it's just a fluke, but I'm going to say the new switch will be assigned a member ID and then placed in an inactive state. Which command verifies that graceful routing engine switchover GRES is operational? Well, I know that it's not a replication command, so it's a show system switchover on the master RE, or is it on the backup? Again, this is one of those 50-50 situations, but I think it might be a bit more than 50-50 because this GRES comes in only when the master goes down, right? So if the master's gone down, then you have to do this command on the backup. So I'd say it's more like a 75-25 situation here. So I'm going to say show system switchover on the backup RE. What are two benefits of 802, which is ether channel, which is a lag, link aggregation protocol. It doesn't simplify interface configuration. If anything, it complicates it because you have to do a bit more. It increases bandwidth, definitely, because you could have like, what is it, up to 64 links? I usually say 8, but I think it's gone up to 64 bundled together, and it creates physical layer redundancy. Yeah. Submit the answers. Oh, okay. So I got over 90%. I got 95. That is excellent. Looks like I got a couple wrong. So let's just do a review to see which ones I got wrong. I'm not going to look at any ones that are correct. I'm only going to look for my incorrect ones. Oh, I was doing so. Okay. Which two OSPF header fields must match the formula JNCIS over a broadcast connection? The hello interval and the options field. It says in little writing here, options. These options are critical for correct OSPF operation, so they too must match between neighbors. Okay, I learned something today. I didn't know. Let's move on to the next one. Out of 40, if I got 95%, that means I only got 2 or 3 answers wrong. Here's another one. Both the R1 and R2 devices are advertising prefix X. You can use the local... You can use the local preference attribute to direct all outbound traffic through a specific peer. Ooh, that's new. Okay, so I'd eliminated local preference, but it was actually local preference on this one. So that's a very good one. Let me just read that again because that's important to me. You can use the local preference attribute to direct all outbound traffic through a specific peer. Excellent. Okay. Let's see, did I get any other ones wrong? All right, guys, thank you very much. That's it for this. The video is over. I will be booking my JNCIS-ENT exam and I will let you know how that goes. I'm pretty confident going into it. But I'll see you in the next one.